Well, hello everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of Certified Forgotten. As I always say, as you're sick of hearing, as you know by heart, we're still the internet's only podcast that talks about horror films with 10 or fewer reviews on Rotten Tomatoes. We got away from using our tagline. Donato and I both agree we want to get back into it. The namesake of the show is that some films are certified fresh, some films are certified rotten, our films are certified forgotten. And our goal is to get you to watch some shit you haven't seen before. That's basically the ball game in a nutshell. I'm here, Matt Monagle, with my host as always, Matt Donato. How are you doing, Matthew?
The world is on fire, and I am just doing my best.
The world, more broadly speaking, your world more specifically, or a combination of both?
I'm just keeping it really general this time. We don't have to get into specifics. It's just the world.
Okay, all right. So Donato's not experiencing a particular existential crisis, just a crisis writ large.
Just the regular existential crisis.
Just the regular
nothing new. Absolutely nothing new.
Okay. Well, hey, if you're experiencing an existential crisis, the one thing I can say is that the movie we're going to talk about today probably helps, hurts, doesn't hurt. I don't know. It's a good movie to watch when you're in the middle of an existential crisis, I think. And it's brought to us by a really, really cool guest. Donato, introductions, please.
Absolutely. I have known this person's work for a while, being in the New York, Brooklyn scene for a bit. Movies like Me, Most Beautiful Island, Darling. She served as a producer on, and then made the jump to writing and directing her own stuff, The Ranger and The Sacrifice Game. It is Jenn Wexler. Jenn, thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me.
So, Jenn, great to have you on the show. Really excited to talk about the movie you picked too. Donato texted me while watching it to talk about it, which very rarely happens. I can count on the number of fingers the times that Donato has texted me while watching the movie. So we'll get to that all in due time. But we want to talk a little bit about you and your relationship to the horror genre, because I don't think people wake up one morning and say, "I'm going to be a horror filmmaker." Maybe some do. I'm sure that happens. But we want to unpack a little bit your own journey, maybe starting with those first formative horror experiences that you can remember helping you fall in love with the genre.
Yes. My gateway drug into horror was Are You Afraid of the Dark? When I was 5 years old. I was obsessed with this TV show. It was my favorite thing. And I became, I think from this show, watching them all hang out in the woods at night and tell stories, I became that kid in my friend group who was like, let's do spooky things. Let's go like after school and hang out in the graveyard. Let's do like light as a feather, stiff as a board at our slumber party. Let's play with the Ouija board at our slumber party. I was always that person. And in watching the movie that we're going to talk about, I kind of realized that, if somebody had said to me, let's do this thing when I was a teenager, like I would have been one of those people that was like, yeah, let's do this thing. Let's, plot of the movie. So anyway, that was me. And then I became obsessed when I was like 12 years old with Buffy the Vampire Slayer and all the late 90s teen slashers. Those were like, that was my obsession at that time. And actually, I feel like Scream like taught me about the rest of horror. So because I watched Scream and then I was like, oh my God, I have to watch all these movies that Scream references. And then that really opened the doors to my actively going after older movies and understanding those influences.
It's funny because, I grew up as a kid watching a lot of Mystery Science 30,000, and I haven't watched a ton in a long time, but I will still like watch a new movie, hear a new line of dialogue from a film, see somebody reference an old TV show, and like something clicks. I'm like, oh, that was a joke on this one episode of MST3K that I never got until this moment. So it's funny how your memory, you find yourself filling in those blanks as you're going, and you're like, oh, this horror movie that I've known for 20 years referenced a movie that I just watched for the first time today, and now I get a joke that I haven't gotten for so long.
Yeah, it's awesome to see how things influence and affect each other.
Can I ask for the Are You Afraid of the Dark fans listening? Do you have an episode that sticks in your mind as like a real top notch, or one of those ones that really affected you? Like, for example, I've always been terrified of Chucky, and I think that came from being terrified of Slappy. I think that's where it evolved from Slappy into Chucky. So that's mine. Like mine is I was the Slappy stuff killed me.
So one thing that I don't like to do ever is go back. Like, I haven't gone back to Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I haven't gone back to Are You Afraid of the Dark? Because these things are like perfect memories in my childhood mind, and I don't want to destroy them with my adult outlook. However, so I can't even tell you the full plots or character names, but the like, for instance, one that sticks out in my mind is the one where the girl sees like the ghost girl in the mirror, and then there's all the like scribbles all around the room. And then there's like another one about like about horses and hounds and the ghost lady with the hound dog in the, one of those outfits. So yeah, I mean, I could go on just giving you guys little bits of pieces, but I'll stop there.
No, I like that outlook, actually, of not going back and preserving something in that childhood whimsy, because 100% I have made the mistake of going back on a few things. Like, this is the dumbest example, but there was an animated Donkey Kong cartoon, and it came out a really long time ago, and it was on Tubi. I was like drunk one night, and I'm like, you know what? Let's put this on and see what this is. And it might have ruined it for me forever. Like, it is, I know it was bad, but going back, I'm like, fuck, this is really bad. So I get that. I actually like that.
Yeah. I did go back and watch the Buffy pilot again fairly recently. And I was like, oh my God, like somehow when you're like 11 years old and you're watching this stuff, you're just so into the story and the magic and all of it. But as an adult watching this, I was like, oh my God, look at this production value. This is like ridiculous. This is like network TV, 90s network TV, like just crazy. So anyway, I try not to do it too often.
If it makes you feel better, I watched all of Buffy and Angel for the first time when I was unemployed after college. And that, even now, I'm like, I don't know if I could go back and revisit it and have the same experience. My brain was more fully formed than yours was when you sat down and watched Buffy for the first time. And even I'm like, I mean, maybe I could do like the last season of Angel and be okay. But there's a lot of stuff in that show that I'm like, I'm going to leave that where it belongs, in the past.
Yeah.
We'll talk a little bit about, I won't say that you were a goth kid. I'm going to let you beat the allegations, even though you were hanging out in graveyards in high school and stuff. It feels like maybe it was there. It was close. Talk a little bit about how you went from being somebody who enjoyed the spooky stuff to being somebody that wanted to find ways to do that for a living.
So in high school, I started making shorts, and they all were a little spooky or sci-fi or whatever. And I was just like a big fan of movies, and I knew I wanted to do something film related. And when I was looking at schools, I mean, college is expensive. Film school, I was like, I started to realize as I was going to different schools to visit, like, oh, you have to pay tuition, and then you have to pay to make your short film. And that's like insane. Like, who has the money for all of this? So anyway, I found this screenwriting program, and my 18-year-old logic was, okay, well, my parents, I can say to my parents, like, I don't need to, look, all I need is a laptop for screenwriting. So anyway, I ended up going to the University of the Arts in Philadelphia in their Writing for Film and TV program, which, by the way, not to get too into it, but rest in peace, just like last week announced with no notice to anybody that they're just like closing this university that's been around for 150 years. Mm-hmm. Totally absurd. Mismanagement, it seems like. Details are still coming out. Anyway, I had a fantastic college experience there. And while I was there, I got an internship for a company called FearNet, which is a horror TV channel. You guys have talked a little bit about it on other episodes.
There's a lot of nodding that just happened right now. You can't see it, but we were like, yep, FearNet, yep.
Yeah, so I got this internship there. And when I graduated, it was around the same time that FearNet, which used to be based in Philadelphia, was moving to Los Angeles. So I was like, well, what else do I have to do? I am also going to move to Los Angeles. So I did that. And when I did that, I got upgraded to my first real job, which was marketing coordinator. And so I was the marketing coordinator at FearNet for 4 years.
So I have to ask, if you listen, you're familiar. Donato and I talked a little bit about our day jobs. I do marketing full time, and then the film stuff wherever I can fit it in the margins. How does beginning on the marketing side of the film industry shape how you then go on to become a producer and a filmmaker? Do you find that you look at things maybe a little bit differently than somebody that was just like, I'm going to make my movie and they're going to figure out how to market it?
I think so, because I really, while I had been a fan of horror, like working at FearNet allowed me to kind of start to understand it as an industry and as a business. We were in the Lionsgate building. Peter Block, who is the producer of all the Saw movies and Descent and a bunch of other incredible movies, he was the head of FearNet at the time, so I got to like listen in to conversations of, of the industry from that kind of perspective. We had people like Joe Lynch coming in to like meet with Peter, and I was just like sitting behind my cubicle like watching these different filmmakers come in. So it started in terms of changing over to producing and then directing, it started to show me that it was real. Like this thing that seemed so far away actually was real. People that I was around were doing it. This filmmaker, Drew Daywalt, I don't know if you guys are familiar with him, but he made all these incredible shorts in like the late 2000s, horror shorts. And he was like, I will produce your first like, post-college horror short. And was totally instrumental in like showing me like, oh, this is possible. Drew Daywalt, by the way, is now like an incredible children's author. He wrote that book, The Day the Crayons Quit, and other children's books. But he produced my first short, which was called Slumber Party, and just a quick 3-minute short. But he showed me like, oh no, this is possible. This is how you do it. And then while I was working at FearNet, I became aware of Glass Eye Pix. It was around the same time that The House of the Devil came out. And I just started fangirling out over this company and watched all their movies, watched Habit became a favorite movie, Larry Fessenden's Habit, The Last Winter, Wendigo, all of Larry's movies. And soon after, I met my now husband while working at FearNet, and Sean Redlitz, who was on your guys' podcast a couple episodes ago.
Shout out, Sean.
And Sean got a job at Food Network in New York, and he was like, do you want to go to New York with me? Do you want to stay in LA? And I was like, I feel like I have a vibe for LA. Like, yeah, I'll go to New York and see what that's about. And so I did that. And when I went to New York, now having this whole understanding of the horror genre, I really was like, I need to work at a horror company in New York. And there were like 3, which was like Fangoria, Chiller, and Glass Eye. And then ultimately I got introduced to Larry Fessenden and Peter Polk at Glass Eye Pix. I was invited to Larry Fessenden's Christmas party, and I pitched myself to them when they were very drunk, and then they hired me.
That is I love that story, number one, as a foodie, because Food Network is what got you to Glass Eye Pix in a way. That is fantastic.
Yeah, it is. Thanks, Food Network.
And then, I've been lucky to have attended a few of those parties myself, the Christmas parties at Fessenden's, and it is the perfect place to do that because everyone is having so much fun. Everyone is kind of like gelling, but you are also like proving yourself in a way. Like, I feel like that is it's an honor to be invited to that circle. It's an honor to be welcomed in. And the idea of pitching yourself there is like the perfect place to do it. Because as much as like they want to have fun, I think like Larry and everyone at Glass Eye, the perception I got from them is like they know their people and they're always on the lookout to be like, how do we expand our circle? Who do we bring in? But they're also selective in a good way. So like the fact that you got that job that night, basically pitching them at the Christmas party, is like the biggest testament of quality.
Yeah, it was crazy. Like they're all drunk. They're like, yeah, Jen's now working at Glass Eye. And I started like the following Monday. And by the way, in my pitch, I was like, oh, I have this background in marketing at FearNet. I want to do your marketing. I want to do your social media. So that was like what got me in there, in the door of their office. And then once I was in there, I was like, actually, guys, I really want to learn how to produce. And then later I was like, actually, guys, I really want to direct. So anyway, that was the arc of that.
So I have two questions I want to ask. I'll start with the easy one first. It's like, you're starting out, you're in the Lionsgate building, people like Joe Lynch are coming in and other filmmakers are coming in, and you're getting to like rub elbows with them. But then you get in front of Larry and you start working with Larry. And like, how instrumental is that as an aspiring filmmaker to be like sitting right next to Larry Fessenden and learning from him? Like how much of a leg up was that?
I mean, it was incredible because I had never, working on the marketing side, you're not like on set. So it was the first time that I started to be involved in actual productions. And over the years of working at Glass Eye, I mean, it was the best way to learn how to make movies because I had Larry and Peter as resources who, even when I started producing on my own, they were always there if I ran into any trouble. I always had people to check in with, to ask. And they just really took me under their wing and like taught me like how to do everything.
And then the second, so when you started to get producing again, like I am very familiar with your producing work as well as your written and directing work. So I adore Like Me, I adore Most Beautiful Island. But what was the hardest from a producer's standpoint to kind of like come into the industry? Like, what was your come to Jesus moment of like, oh shit, I'm here. This is time to really like bust my ass.
I would say, I think Larry and Peter we're both kind of like, all right, you really want to do this, go for it. So I had produced a couple of short things for them. I did Larry's ABCs of Death. And then I did some stuff for Chiller, some like short content for Chiller. But then I wanted to produce a feature. I wanted to be like the lead producer on a feature. And I met Anna and I went to Larry and I was like, I really want to do this and I will be the point person for everything. Like, Larry's the producer on it. So is Peter. There are a couple of other producers on it. But I was like, I will be the one spearheading this. So, Larry, I'll ask you some questions from time to time, but I'll be the person on the ground. And I think that I just like halfway through the shoot, probably, I was like, oh my God, producing a feature is insane. But it was like trial by fire, and also Anna at the time was a first time director and she is in it. She's in every frame of that movie. And we shot on Super 16. So it was like, and we're shooting, Most Beautiful Island just quickly is about a woman who's moved to New York City and she doesn't have any papers. She's from Spain. She's an immigrant. She doesn't have any papers. She doesn't have any money. So she agrees to like work this party, and the party is very dark and bad things happen at this very rich people party. And so it's very guerrilla style. In fact, we were like, we want to shoot this like Habit. We want this to feel like Habit. It's just like a bunch of us running around New York City, getting all these shots, whatever. And yeah, it was a lot to take on for my first feature, but it worked out. And we later ended up winning the Grand Jury Prize at South by Southwest. So it really did work out. I'm very grateful for that experience.
It's so aggressively New York, and I love it for that. And also, the spider scene fucked me up so bad. Like, I can't deal with that kind of shit. So yeah, were you around the spider when that was fucking happening?
Oh, yeah. And I had to bring in like an ambulance to be there just in case, because while the spiders were supposed to be like non-harmful if they bit you, if you happen to have an allergic reaction, and who knows if you have an allergic reaction unless you get bit, like you could go into shock or whatever. So just in this, like, just in case one of our two actresses had an allergic reaction, we had to have an ambulance nearby. So like arranging all of that, I mean, it was very, very epic, very dramatic.
And talking a little bit about, your work with Larry, we had an opportunity to sit with him at last year's Brooklyn Horror Film Festival. Had a really fun conversation talking about kind of his work climbing up and the influence that he's had on future generations. And I'm kind of curious, you can draw links between the work that he was doing and Mumblecore that followed, and then Mumblegore that kind of hybridized out of that. And it just sort of set the stage in a really beautiful way for a entire generation of really independent filmmakers that were like, wait, I don't need all of this stuff to go make my horror movie. I'm going to go make my horror movie. So I'm curious. I know what Larry said when we asked him the question, but I'm curious what you sort of think that legacy is, and what filmmakers like you have taken out of, the Glass Eye experience and that ethos, and brought to your own movies.
I mean, working for Larry was the most incredible thing, because he was always like, there's a way to do it. We can figure it out. You might not be doing it for this in the splashiest way you wanted, but what is the emotion of what you're trying to do? What is like the story? And can you take something that might be $1 million? Oh, you can't get $1 million. Okay, well, how can we tell this story in a way that we can execute it at? And it can be just as good of a movie. But instead of flying everybody to the desert, you're doing it in New York. You're telling the same story, but having it like here where we have resources, for instance. And just for instance, to follow up on talking a little bit more about Habit, that was always, something he would reference. He would be like, well, on Habit, we shot, I forget the number of days, so I'm sorry, Larry, to misquote you, but something like 100 days, but they would only shoot a couple hours here and there on each of those days. And it was a crew of like 5 people. And that's another movie where Larry is the star of that movie. So he's in everything. And also, obviously, they shot on film. It was the mid-90s. So he really had to trust his DP, but him and his DP were totally in sync. So he was always like, how can you use what you have? How can we use locations we have access to? How can we use friends that, are, one of his friends drove a taxi, and that taxi made it into a couple of different movies. So it's like really thinking like, but it taught me how to make movies. I like to say that like it taught me how to make movies with my hands. Like I feel like I have physically put these movies together, even though I was never the person actually cutting and taping the films together.
Well, and you bring up the movies that you're making. I mean, you've had all this experience. You've marketed horror films. You've helped horror films financially get off the ground. You've been the person that made sure there was an ambulance on set so that when somebody got bit by a spider, they didn't die, right? Like you have had your hands in every aspect of what it means to go from concept to finished film premiering at the film festival. And then you got to do that yourself with your first film, The Ranger. Can you talk a little bit about what it was like putting it all together for you, and being to be a feature filmmaker yourself?
Yeah, it was really, okay. I never felt ready to direct until I fully understood how to make a movie. So as I was producing these movies, it was starting to come together. So Most Beautiful Island and Darling, those were the first 2 movies that I produced that fully were completed. And after those 2 movies, I was like, okay, I understand the various stages of this, from getting it going to delivering and promoting it. Like I now see that full trajectory. And I was thinking about what I wanted to do. Actually, I wrote The Sacrifice Game in 2013 when I first started working at Glass Eye Pix. I wrote a draft of that. And I realized in making these other movies, I was like, oh, The Sacrifice Game is way too big to make as my first feature. So I put it aside, and I was thinking about what I could do. And I was like, Kids in the Woods, that's easy. That I feel like we can make for a low budget. And my friend from college, in my screenwriting program, had written a version of The Ranger, which I had always loved. Punk kids go up against a killer park ranger. I was always like, dude, that's a great idea. Like, I hope you do something with that one day. So then in like 2014, I called him and I was like, yo, can you find that script and can we work on it together? And so as I was producing these other films, we were working on the Ranger script, and I was really, again, using like, what resources do we have? How can we put this together? And then, it finally came together, and what felt to me like finally, it came together in 2017. That's when we actually shot it. We pitched it at the Frontiers Market at the Fantasia Film Festival in 2016. That ultimately helped us get our financing, and we shot in the spring of 2017. And used a lot of the collaborators that I had worked with on projects that I had produced. For instance, James Seward, was the DP of Like Me, and he was also the DP of The Ranger. So just tapping into, those relationships and resources.
Speaking of those like relationships and resources, I mean, I love the mantra of like Benson and Moorhead, just like make movies with your friends. And I think the Glass Eye Family is one of the best examples of that. Like you see recurring talents come through, like Chloe and all these other actors and actresses, and like you just said, James behind the camera as DP, and of course, like Me is so fucking beautiful. Why would you not take him along for the ride? So I'm not saying it makes it easier in a way like, oh, that's an easy blah blah blah, but having that circle, like, to support you, I guess, to say like how comfortable did that let you feel in moving forward and like making films? Like, was that an advantage?
Oh, 100%. It made me feel completely comfortable. I wouldn't have done it any other way. Like, I've since worked with crews that I don't know that aren't my friends, but for my first feature, having that support system, Larry was a producer on it. Andrew Vandenhouten, who was a friend, was a producer on it. Heather Buckley, who is my very good friend, is a producer on it. Having all, like, just being surrounded by people who, it's not just a working relationship, but it is like a family. And you are working with these people all the time. Like, I'm so grateful that I got to make my first feature that way. And also there's just the ease of communication because they know you've been talking about this, like, just in casual conversation for years with some of these people. And so everyone was very, like, tuned in into the vibe of it. And also everyone is so cool because these are kind of hard shoots to do. You have a crew of like 20 people out in the woods in upstate New York. For our final scene, by the way, Jeremy Holm, who plays the Ranger, and Chloe Levine, who plays Chelsea, among our other cast as well. Everybody was so cool, but I call them out specifically because we had a scene that takes place on a fire tower, near a fire tower. It's like the climax of the movie. And we had to walk like 2 hours up a mountain, like vertically, because roads don't go there. So the crew had to carry equipment. The actors had to like walk up there. And you can only do that with cool people who are treating it like it's a family atmosphere. And it was really fun. It was a fun day for us all in the woods.
I'm gonna take a shot in the dark with this question, but like I feel like when you have a family, you talk to each other a bit blunter. Let's say, like, you say things that you wouldn't tell someone. Let's say if you went into a classroom and we're gonna give some kind of dissertation on filmmaking versus you and your friends are kind of drinking and shooting the shit. So, what is the most like punk as fuck advice you got about filmmaking? If that is something you have in your mind, like what that one quote that someone said to you that like you wouldn't hear in a class, but you like heard behind the curtains.
Let me think. Wait, sorry, go on. Can you re-ask this question? I'm trying to understand.
Yeah, just like some advice that is just like punk as fuck. Just something someone said to you offhanded that isn't like a teacher's advice, like the kind of stuffy way they would deliver it to
It's
you.
like the drunk uncle Thanksgiving advice, like, when you get married, this is what you want to do. Like the kind of thing you're like, all right, I don't know if that's appropriate, but I remember it forever.
Honestly, I feel like everything Larry says is like that. If you're like overly thinking about your cut and you're dragging it out, Larry will be like, fuck it, it's, just do the thing, da da da. So I feel like I don't know if it's one piece of advice, or maybe I will like message you later and be like, oh, I thought of the perfect thing to encapsulate it. But I think that because you're working with your friends so much, you get the like bitching about stuff. I think it's the being able to be so casual about bitching about stuff. Like fuck, this is a bad example, but fuck the weather. That's a safe example.
Sure.
Fuck the weather. It's raining. It's supposed to be sunny. What the fuck are we going to do? I think it also allows you to come to, because you don't have that layer of formality with your friends. It actually allows you to like not waste time on that and solve the problem faster.
Yeah, I love being able to talk to Monocle and just cutting the bullshit, just getting right to it. Like that's I like working with someone I can trust. Yeah, so I'm sure there is a Larryism in there somewhere, but that makes sense that it's just Larry's common vibe. Everything is just I remember our first Q&A I ever did with him. This is really quick, but it was for Like Me. And it was Rob, it was Larry, and it was me. And we were going on stage at the Tribeca Theater to do the Q&A after the movie. And we sit down just to discuss it for like an hour beforehand. And Larry's like, hey, let's go to the diner. They have Heineken. And I'm like, oh, okay. So he's like, he slams like 4 beers in a time that like we're talking. And like, I think I had 2. And Rob was just kind of like nervous as fuck. It was his first like Q&A of the tour, let's say. And just getting that is like, again, that's Larry, the punk rock version of that. So that tracks. It tracks 100%.
And yeah, a lot of our meetings include alcohol.
That's fine. That is just getting the creative juices flowing.
Yeah.
Well, last question for you, Jen. Then we're going to talk about the movie you picked today. But I do want to ask, as somebody who's worn so many hats in the industry, a lot of times our guests, people that we know, will come on the podcast, and it becomes a little bit of a therapy session about the state of horror, about the state of journalism, about the state of a lot of different things. So I would love a pulse check. Like, you know, all these years later, after you broke into the industry on the marketing side, having done a little bit of everything, is it still something that you love and get excited about? Do you feel like it was better 20 years ago than it is today? You know, do you have strong feelings about the direction that horror has been on in the 21st century?
Yeah, I mean, this year especially has been insane for horror. I feel like every movie that comes out, I'm like, oh, that's my favorite movie of the year. No, wait, that's my favorite movie of the year. And I haven't even, just like, for instance, Immaculate and The First Omen, and I saw the TV Glow, and I haven't even seen Longlegs or Maxine yet, but I'm like, I can't wait for those movies too. So it just feels like hit after hit is coming out, and the industry does feel like it's slowed down in terms of production recently after the strikes, like with the strikes, obviously, but then after the strikes. But I mean, we're still getting these movies that were shot before the strikes now coming out. And it just feels like this is, I don't know, the industry just keeps getting better and better, in my opinion. And hopefully production will move again soon. And then we'll continue on, on this trajectory that we're on.
I love that. That is more cheerful than we usually end the first part of our episodes on. So we'll somebody who's excited about horror and wants to see it continue doing what it's doing, that's a good change of pace for us a little bit, I think. So we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about the movie of the day, which is Livid. So hang with us. We'll be right back. Hello, hello. Just a friendly reminder that you can visit www.certifiedforgotten.com to read some really, really good film criticism. We're talking about the films of the 1990s that you might have missed, the films of the 2000s and the 2010s that you might have missed. Really, we're just shining a light on all of that undiscovered horror, stuff that got a raw deal in distribution, things that came out in a crowded weekend and never got a fair shot with audiences. We're here, and our writers are here to put the spotlight directly back on them. So once again, visit www.certifiedforgotten.com and check out some of the best horror film criticism for movies you haven't seen yet. Okay, welcome back. So this week on the podcast, we're going to talk about a movie that Donato said, I think, and I quote, "I have no idea how this has less than 10 reviews," is what you said when you kicked it over to me. But if you haven't had a chance to see Livid, a very, very quick, very brief synopsis. If you're going to start a career as an in-home caretaker, be careful who you take on as a mentor. That's the lesson learned by Lucy, a young woman struggling to find her path in life after the loss of her mother. When Lucy's rounds take her to the home of Mrs. Jessel, a very rich and very comatose ballet instructor, she is persuaded by her boyfriend to break into the mansion after hours to locate the woman's hidden treasure. But little does Lucy know that the only person about to give up something valuable is Lucy herself. Released in 2011, Livid is a unique twist on the vampire movie from the French duo Behind Inside. There you go. It's not hard to find. So as always, if you want to go watch it and then listen to this part of the episode, we recommend that you do that. But for those who are plowing through and keep listening, Jen, you had your pick of anything, not anything, but anything with 10 or fewer reviews. This was the movie you brought to us. What made you want to talk about Livid?
When Donato said, what's a cool movie you've seen that you feel like people don't talk about? This was actually one of the first things that I thought about.
Nice.
I saw it at Fantastic Fest in 2011. I was there on behalf of FearNet at that time. And it was just one of those things that it was one of my first, I think that was my first festival experience, actually. And it was one of those times that you just see a movie and it feels magical and like, oh my God, you got to see this thing before anybody else. And it just like stuck in my mind as just one of those incredible festival screening experiences. And then I kind of lost track of what was going on with it. When it gets brought up, I'm always like, oh my God, that movie is incredible. I know that it had its distribution issues for a while there because I think it was a Dimension Weinstein movie and it had complications there. Maybe you guys know more about that. Um, but it's great. And I feel like it's influenced a lot of recent movies that have come out. So, yeah.
Any movies in particular jump to the top of your mind, Jen?
Don't Breathe and Abigail.
That was the one. Yeah. Donato was texting me specifically about that movie. He was saying, because we recorded an episode on Abigail, he was like, I am ashamed that I did not mention this even once in there. We both are. Mea culpa.
Well, and going back, I'll piggyback right off that because, Monica, you asked, it's readily, or sorry, you didn't ask. You said it's readily available now. The problem is it was not readily available because I have seen every Bustillo and Maury movie, and I see them very aggressively when they come out. I don't let them wait. And Jen, you are 100% right. This was purchased outside, I think, during its festival run by Dimension. That was around 2011, 2012. And literally it sat until Shudder purchased the rights in 2022. So from about 2011, 2012, nobody saw this movie. They purchased it. The things happened obviously with Dimension and Weinstein, and this movie just died. It died with that entire legacy. So you couldn't see it until Shudder actually rescued it. And that is the reason why I hadn't seen it. And I'm very mad that it took me this long to actually get to it. I fucking love their work. I love Bustillo and Maury. I think they're two of the best filmmakers working today. If you haven't seen Inside, if you haven't seen anything else they've made, even for something like The Deep House, which I don't personally think is their best work, it's still fucking awesome to watch because it's an underwater haunted house movie. They're always going to try something crazy. They're always going to push some boundaries. And like Livid being one of their earliest films, but latest releases, really encapsulates the fact that like they were hitting on all cylinders from the beginning. Like their first movie was more Abigail than Abigail, and that says a fucking lot.
It's also so cool. You make a movie like Inside, and then to look at Livid after that, like clearly their budget went up, but also just their choice of what they wanted to do after Inside. Like there's, maybe it's not as fucked up in certain ways as Inside is, but it's certainly still very visceral in other ways. But then it's also like supernatural and like this dark fairy tale as well. So it's kind of cool that they wanted to go in that direction for their second film.
Yeah, they're fearless. I mean, they're fearless across the board, whether you're talking about practical effects, what they're willing to show, how gruesome they're willing to be, and that is like both storytelling and visuals. Everything they are thinking about in the horror genre is across the board. There is no one aspect that outweighs the other. They are in control of their films, again, whether you like them or not. And I think that's the best mark of a filmmaker is they're confident, they are stylish, their movies are very much their own. And there's a lot of Beatrice Daly in them, so I can't be mad at much.
Well, let's talk about getting into this movie because I know that I don't want to sell people away from it, but it takes its time to get started, and I know that because my wife does not watch horror movies with me, but she reads the Wikipedias, and at one point I paused it because I had to get up and get water or something, and she was like this is the first like every 45 minutes in the movie, it's the first paragraph of the Wikipedia. Like there's 5 paragraphs for the second half of the movie and what happens. And I was like, oh, it's going to be one of those. That's pretty exciting. So I want to start by asking both of you kind of what you think of the time that this movie takes to get to the madness that follows. And, especially if you're talking about if this movie gets sort of lumped into the idea of French extremism and you expect a certain amount of like, go from the very beginning, it feels sort of like a bold choice to be like, no, we're gonna take as much time as we need to establish these characters.
I understand from a storytelling perspective why it does what it does, and I appreciate it for that. And And I think it's kind of cool that it starts off feeling actually a little bit more like a drama, that then just gets crazier and crazier. One of the things I love about this movie is that it just keeps building and building and building, especially in that second half, especially in that third act. And it's like every time you think you know what this movie is, it just like twists itself. And at the end, when you look back, you're like, I see how we got here, but wow, I never expected to go on this journey.
Yeah, I think the pacing is meticulous and important because, once again, going back to this, what I just said prior about Bustillo and Maury is like their movies are very intentional. Everything they do is for a reason. And in Livid, that is the calm before the storm. And when it works, like it does here, it works so well because you have that really slow build up that builds that fairy tale kind of environment. You're safe. It's just the old hag in the castle. It's very protected in a way, and they want to make sure you feel that because the second half of the movie is depraved. It's crazy. It does go off the rails, and I am a big proponent of a lot of these slow burn horror movies have learned the wrong lesson, and that is you just go slow burn until the last 2 minutes, the last 5 minutes, whatever it is. I think people don't understand that a good slow burn is half slow, half off the rails. And Livid understands that. Livid is one of those rare cases where it can be as slow as it wants for the first 45 minutes. And then the second 45 deliver upon everything they've promised. They understand that you've been patient, you've been a good boy, good girl, you've just been very attentive, and they are going to reward you with something that is so bonkers you can't conceptualize it except for a few flashes in the beginning of, let's say, a dead child's body.
Everything everything matters. Like things you don't even realize matter. Thematically also, and character wise, we can get into some things that might be spoilers or not, but just to say everything matters.
Well, I say we go for spoilers because I want to get your thoughts on. I described it in the plot description as sort of a vampire movie. I believe that to be the case because the directors have said that in interviews, and I went looking for them to figure out exactly how they described their characters and their creatures. So we can say that it is a version of a vampire movie. So the bold question that I want to ask is, when you're doing a type of film, a ghost story, a vampire movie, a werewolf movie, something with tropes and like an understanding of the interior logic of that world, I love how much of the stuff they rip out, how much of the mythology and like the legend they rip out and do their own thing. But as viewers, I want to get your opinions of that and what you think that it, again, we're talking about bold, big swings. Like, how much is too much of, like, at what point do you make your movie not recognizable with the type of creature that you're playing with? And does that even really matter for audiences? Jen, we'll start with you.
I thought it pulls from these different mythologies and weaves them together in ways that like I personally hadn't seen before, but that I buy. Like it never loses me. And I think that the twist after twist that happens, especially towards the end of the movie, I don't know, it starts to just feel, you started off, talking about pace. We started off kind of slow, but then you're like in roller coaster territory and you're like, wait, what is happening? What is going on?
It's giving everyone a little taste of so many horror subgenres, I think, in my mind. So number one, I will agree, like the way where it's pulling from is very cool to me because we have seen so many vampire movies. We have seen the easy take on it. If we want to do the Abigail comparison, because they're both movies about a vampire ballerina in a house, uh yeah, Abigail kind of plays it by the books, while Livid is aggressively its own beast. And I like both movies. I'm not saying one is better than the other in any way. I'll hold that for other conversations. But the way Livid represents vampire lore and guts it, just like you said, Monogl, and puts back all the parts that it wants and takes from other subgenres, because all of a sudden you have like body horror happening where the vampire is being operated on and there's like a fucking like a skeleton being built out of
Mm-hmm.
old school steampunky antique shit. And that is a cool twist on something I've never seen before. So if you're gonna, if you're gonna take swings, if you're gonna make a movie, I want you to make it your own. Anyone can just make another vampire movie. I'd rather see your take on the genre, and I'd rather see your take on mythologies that are ingrained now in horror. So for me, I'm still going to gravitate towards the big swing every time. And again, I'm not going to like it every time, but that's just me. I want to see you go crazy. I want to see you go wild. I'm still going to be in the seat for a filmmaker that makes a 10 out of 10 followed by a 0 out of 10 because they're just going to do their own shit.
Um, let's talk about the kinds of subgenres that are in this movie. In
Yes.
addition to vampire, there's body horror, there's body swapping, there's haunted house, there is hag, there is robot. What am I missing? That's 5 already.
You can kind of like I don't want to say it's like a zombie movie by any chance, but I feel like there's a little bit of reanimation
Yeah, it's
zombie
got
elements.
Yeah, that works.
Between the cosmetics, let's say, because obviously like the porcelain doll, the broken porcelain flesh is very much more zombie to me. The paranormal is very strong because typically a vampire film to me is more a creature feature, where this does absolutely play more in the paranormal. I think there's just obviously I'm going to think of like Suspiria just in ballet schools and stuff like that. So I feel there is a giallo influence in some scenes because
Dance
once again,
horror.
dance horror, but like aggressively bloody too, because it's Bustillo Maury. Like this is what they do. So very much it's going to be bloody, bloody, bloody. So it's pulling from all these places. Like I don't, am I missing anything else?
Steampunk I would throw in there too, probably a little bit because it's got the clockwork animation thing.
And
And then
home
maybe
invasion.
very much home invasion. Yeah,
That's the don't breathe of it all. Exactly.
Yeah.
correct.
And it's kind of against this like seafaring village, which is
Co-
just fun.
coastal horror. Yeah, like I loved Keating's Offshore recently, just because it is 100% just that foggy coastal horror.
Off
Um,
season.
off season, yeah, yeah. But and don't forget Fairy Tale, because this had like, I know a lot of people take issue with Mama and the where it goes, but this to me has that kind of folkloric Mama vibe where you can do horror but also make it whimsical and magical, and there is this kind of endearing just niceness to it. And it is very much not a nice movie. I understand that, but like that, I think that folkloric like whimsy is very important to the film as well in its identity.
Yeah, and
Honestly, Donato, I would argue that it is among all the movies that we've watched for Certified Forgotten. I think it is actually one of the nicer movies. I think it has maybe one of the better hearts and ends up in like a place of empathy and kindness than a lot of the things we do. So I latched onto that. In the grand scheme of our movies, this is a pretty nice movie. I think. Sorry, Jen. Go ahead.
no, I think it's a very sweet movie, especially
Yeah.
the end. It's like, anyway, okay, spoiler. I love movies about like friendship and female bonds, and I love that like through this insane gory roller coaster, ultimately you have this female friendship bonding movie.
It is a very full core version of I support women's rights, but I also support women's wrongs. It's got good women's wrongs energy, kind of across the board on like 6 different levels on here. Well, I want to ask both of you because again, New Yorkers, we've all lived in New York for a spell. I want to talk about the set design on this too, because the mansion and the way they set it up, it really supports 20 minutes of people just wandering the house, which again sounds like I'm being sarcastic, sounds like I'm saying that as a pejorative. It's like I could have watched a lot more of just room after room slowly unfolding. And it made me think, I found myself thinking a lot weirdly, or maybe not so weirdly, of Sleep No More as I was watching it and the experiences that I had as I was like sort of wandering and like there was a narrative going on somewhere, but I didn't really care. I just wanted to like open drawers and look at the creepy shit. So Jen, you've had to make those kind of decisions, right? You worked with a team on figuring out the way that a room should look and the way that a house should look and what that means for the people who live there. Talk about the set design and the production design on this.
I think the comp of Sleep No More is incredible. For anybody that doesn't know, Sleep No More for a very long time was an immersive theater experience. I think they just closed an immersive theater experience in New York, where you're walking around this like old hotel, but also it's a lot of other landscapes. in this building, and there's Macbeth going on, but you can follow that and participate, or you can ignore that and just like walk into a room and pick things up and read books and like look at knickknacks and find secret hidden like places, and it's really cool. And I think that this is like the movie version of that. I completely 100% agree. And the production design is incredible. In some of these scenes, you're just looking like, wow, like the scene where the guy gets pulled through the mirror into that hidden room, all of the weird science-y experiment stuff. It's just wall to wall stuff and knickknacks. And I just think that this art team had to be huge. And the production designer is like incredible. It just, the location is so magical.
Yeah, it keeps us in that fantasy mindset. It keeps us in that, I would see this in a Mother Goose book or something of that nature. Obviously not for children, but an adult's mother's, grim fable, let's say, a grim fairy tale. And it is just, there are things everywhere, but like it's lush. It's this mansion that, when you describe someone as being rich and like hoarding their wealth, and they're just kind of like the key around the neck and you don't know where it is, but you're looking around at the silver, like the first thing they see is like silver teacups. And in certain houses, like, cool, that's one of the most expensive things, but they see the silver teacups and they're able to look around at the rest of like the furniture and the rest of the like the knickknacks and go like, no, there is much more here that is way more valuable. So just those little visual storytelling like moments, it is a movie and a production that is thinking so far ahead of everything. And that doesn't always happen. I agree. Like sometimes you watch the movie that is in the mansion, but like the mansion's empty and it's just mahogany wood everywhere, and that's cool, awesome. It is a big space, but it's more about what do you do with the space. Do I believe that this old woman who is comatose and wants to die with her things would actually like, is there anything worth dying for in that house? And I believe that in Livid very very dearly.
And the taxidermy element.
Yes. Oh my God.
So there's taxidermied animals all around. There's a tea party with taxidermied heads of animals on dolls' bodies. And then, of course, you have the taxidermied ballerina. Spoiler, sorry. The taxidermied ballerina, which is like a human size. What are those ballet boxes called?
Just like a music box.
Music box, yeah. It's like a life-size music box ballerina. It's haunting. It's the stuff of nightmares.
Yeah, and I need to call out that taxidermy stuff because thank you for not letting me forget that. It is a testament to Bustillo and Maury's vision. They understand what is just so unsettling. And in other movies, let's say, about the haunted tea party and the souls, let's say, that are sitting around the chair and stuff, maybe you would get just some ghosts. Maybe you would just get the apparitions of children or something like that. It would be very simple and straightforward. But they have found a way to make it so unsettling, like just the wolf head taxidermy or like the bass. It's like a giant sea bass head taxidermy on a doll, and the way it just looks over at the camera and stares right at you. It's just the little details. That is when you see filmmakers and you know they're talented. It is the little details and shit like that. Just the fucking morbid creativity of it all.
And this is something unsaid. It's never said in the movie. Now I'm going to get deep into it. It's never said in the movie, but the vampire daughter ballerina isn't allowed to go outside. She's not allowed to have friends. So it's never said explicitly, but it's like, oh, the mom created this so that her daughter could have friends, created this weird tea party with these weird taxidermy animal friends for her. And it's like kind of heartbreaking and sad at the same time.
Like good parenting, but also what the fuck? I don't like. Yeah, the balance there is very, very thin.
Yeah,
there is more than a little let the right one in this. I think it plays with, if you wanted to make a playlist of 2010's vampire movies that were basically like, man, it sucks to be a vampire. Like there's nothing appealing about it. This would slot in really nicely because there is, the character of Anna, who's the daughter. The movie never really for most of it, treats her as anything other than an extension of what her mother has helped her be, right? Or what her mother has helped her create. So you don't get to spend much time with her as a creature, because by the time you finally get to meet her, the first time we meet her is when she's already sort of like the frozen music box version of herself. So that's our introduction, not her killing somebody, not her coming back to life. It's just this like sad thing that gets turned on and does a dance for the sake of her mother. So from the jump, even though this character is going to do and has done some terrible things over the course of her life, the movie never says this is the monster. And I think that exactly as you said, Jen, I think that's kind of how it taps into that a little bit.
Can we also just talk about how creepy the eyelid thing is?
Very much, yes. Do you want to describe that?
Yes. So when we meet Anna in her music box form, her eyelids are like pulled down and like attached to her cheeks, which is so weird and unnerving. And you don't fully understand why she looks like that until later when the same thing happens to our protagonist. And then it's just like, I mean, eye trauma is always horrible. It's a crazy visual.
Yeah, I'm fingernails. Fingernails is my big trauma, but like the scene of watching someone who is still alive get the stitches over their eyelids that's nightmare fuel. That is up there with like no fucking thank you. Like no. But I think Monocle, like going back to what you said really quickly about the first time we see Anna is in broken porcelain doll form, let's say the ballerina form, just standing there as a prop. And talking about intentionality, talking about storytelling, and the way that these two filmmakers let their secrets out, let's say, and let like the story progress. I think it is so goddamn clever that we do not see Anna until her like, or actually, sorry, Anna's introduction halfway through the film is in her most grotesque form. And that just lets everything unfurl with such an insanity where it's like, holy shit, you've been keeping this secret, and like there's still half a movie left. That is a testament once again to like the two filmmakers and how they have such a good control of storytelling. It's A+.
And they do the thing I love, which is, every monster of any salt in most horror movies is just a dancer anyways, really. Just somebody who can bend the way that you need them to bend to get the creepy shots. And they just made the implicit explicit. Their monsters are dancers, so they get to do that like weird, creepy, I don't have joints thing. And it works so well.
It's set up though, because you learn early, oh, she's this famous ballet teacher who was very strict. You see photos of the different ballerinas around the house. So it totally feels like natural when it finally happens, but at the same time, it's totally surprising as well. And then when the mother kills one of the characters, the way that she moves and like crawls over him is so cool and so it's like dancery, but also total horror movie creature. And that I looked it up. That actress who plays Jessel is a choreographer and a dancer. And what cool casting.
It's always smart. I love the indie horror films that I'm blanking on her name now, but there's a redheaded actress, and anytime I see her cast in a movie, I know it's going to be some kind of contortionist monster coming soon. But you cast the right people for that kind of stuff. Twisty Troy, like again another contortionist and someone who moves so fluidly. Like that's monster shit. That's my favorite kind of monster shit.
Yeah. You don't need a lot of makeup. You just need somebody's shoulder doing something it shouldn't. And I'm already like, no, I don't want to watch this movie anymore.
Yeah.
Well, that brings us to our last question, which is always the most important one. We know that this movie sat on the shelf for a very, very long time. We know that these are filmmakers that have made great stuff before, great stuff since, are a little bit of a rarity in the certified forgotten canon, and that they're still making movies. Their last one was, I believe, 2021. And so that's, sometimes by the time we get to one of these movies, the director has sort of faded a little bit or is not working as regularly as they used to. These guys are still working, which is a good thing. But the question we always ask is, how does this movie find the audience that it so clearly deserves? And Jen, we'll start with you. Where do we go to make sure that this movie eventually gets the kind of treatment that like a Del Toro movie does?
Well, I think it starts right here on this podcast. I think the people that are listening to this podcast, especially writers, maybe you'll go back into your Abigail review and tweak it and be like, also, Livid might have been an influence. And if there's I just think because there's so many subgenres at play in this movie, there's actually a lot of opportunities in the future as different movies come out to look back at this movie and reference it. So I would say all you people listening who write reviews for stuff, keep it in mind, and you will be the ones spreading the good word.
Donato?
This one, it kind of has an answer already. It was in purgatory for almost a decade, and Shudder saved it. So that did get attention back on it, rightfully so. But not enough, obviously, because we're talking about it and we're still, trying to say, hey, and people, you're got to get on this. But I think the easy one here is anyone who is a fan of Bustillo Maury, like anyone who loves their catalog and just has missed Livid because of that and maybe forgot about it. I think it's as simple as being like, yo, the dudes who did Inside and all these other rad movies, have you seen their lost film? Something like that. Or double bill it with one of them. However you do that, I think that's going to be important. And it's on Amazon Prime now. Like, it went from being forgotten literally by a production company, or sorry, a distribution company, to being on one of the easiest to watch platforms. So you don't really have an excuse anymore. Go watch Livid. Fuck you.
Watch it right now.
Yeah, like right now.
Donato, do you want to go pitch Screen Rant? The this horror movie probably influenced more Abigail more than you think. Make sure you don't mention the title of the movie though, so they have to click into the article to see which movie you're talking about.
I would never do it for Screen Rant because fuck them, but I will pitch that to a reputable site.
Fair enough. I like it. I think that this is a movie that feels more like a new release for all the reasons we talked about. So it doesn't feel forgotten in the same way that some of these movies sometimes do. I think it just sort of needs a little bit of a push. And I do, I guess sort of the mixed blessing of it premiering on a platform like Shudder is that Shudder's got such a big catalog now that stuff can kind of get lost in the mix. It used to be that if something premiered on there, everybody knew about it. It was like the flavor of the week. But with any of these niche sites as they grow, not to call Shudder overly niche, but any of these sites that are emphasizing curation and quality rather than just a million titles, the ones that are still around are big enough that I think some of these will fall through the cracks. So it's not a guarantee that just because it's here, there, or the other site, it's going to find its audience in its own time. I think this is one we'll have to fight for a little bit. And I hope you're right, Jen. I hope that it did start here and people listen to this and go out and rent it. And then we start a little revolution, a vampire ballerina shaped revolution.
Can I just say one more thing we didn't mention was that there's a Halloween 3 reference in it.
Oh, I didn't even catch that.
The masks. Yeah, the masks.
Nice.
There's a Halloween reference, right? There's another reference too I forgot to write down, like before that. So they're hitting on all cylinders. Like, they know the movie they're making. It's their most, honestly, I think it's like their most commercial, which is bonkers to say this is their most commercial.
We're bringing it full circle because we started this conversation about watching something and going back and appreciating the horror movies that it was referencing or nodding to. And now we can do the same thing with
the Slaughtered Lamb. That's right. They go drinking at the Slaughtered Lamb.
Yeah, that was good. That one I did catch. All right. Well, that is this episode of Certified Forgotten. Go check out Livid. It's available where you rent movies, which is a big step in the right direction for this one. Jen, it was great to have you on the show, and we want to open up the platform here at the end for you to talk about anything you've got upcoming, or if there's nothing you've got upcoming that you want to talk about, anything that's making you feel happy this week, anything that shows or articles or whatever that are bringing you joy.
I just participated in, and by participate, I mean I went and I watched movies at Tribeca, and I saw A Desert and The Devil's Bath, which were both really cool, so keep an eye out for those. I also, right now in New York, they're doing Bleak Week, and I went to a couple of movies at Bleak Week. I saw Come and See for the first time, which, wow. And Sorcerer, I got to see on the big screen, and I'm going to see Hardcore with Paul Schrader on Father's Day, which I'm very excited about. And then I'll just also say that The Sacrifice Game, which is the movie, it's a demonic boarding school movie that takes place on Christmas that I directed. It's on Shudder, so if you're in a Christmas vibe, check it out.
we're always, by nature of this being a Matt Donato podcast, we're always in a Christmas mood around here.
It's halfway to Christmas almost. We got our Christmas horror time. Let's go.
Yeah, Christmas in July. It's
Right.
a couple weeks away.
It's a thing.
God, that
Donato, how do folks go check out I'll just plug all the really cool boys stuff you're writing right now for season 4 and everything else.
Yeah, it's the same spiel as always at Donatobomb, DONATOBOMB on Twitter, Letterboxd, Instagram, Blue Sky, wherever there's a social media. I've probably got that handle. And yeah, I'm on the boys beat for IGN right now. Full season 4 spoiler review is up. The premiere, first 3 episode. Sorry, non-spoiler of the entire series season. Spoiler of 1 through 3 are up. Also some Tribeca coverage as well. I will double down a desert. I will say that's probably going to be the only ones I get a review out for. And yeah, just some other cool stuff. Exuma is hitting Shudder, I think, this week. And it is like Shudder is, I tweeted this before, but like Shudder is very quickly collecting the best horror movies of the year, like Infinity Stones, between Infested and Stop Motion and now Exuma. Like, look out for Exuma. Oh my God, it's so fucking good.
Is that the one that they describe as akin to The Wailing?
Yes, I did. Yeah, absolutely. It's South Korean horror, and I venture to say no one is doing horror better than South Korea right now. It's good.
As for myself, you can find me on social media, mostly just Blue Sky. It's monocle. I really should remember the chart string, but you know how to get there. Please do check out the website, certifiedforgotten.com. We've got about an article a week that's going up right now, and we have some really cool pieces that are up and some really cool pieces that are going to be coming up as well. And if you haven't subscribed already, our patron, patreon.com/certifiedforgotten, we offer a free tier. You get a weekly newsletter that rounds up all the cool stuff that's going on in our community. And then when we hook you, you can give us $1 a month, $3 a month, $5 a month, something to help our writers out.
Yeah, like 100. If you want to give 100 a month, that's great.
Yeah, Elon Musk, if you're listening, okay. Also, give us money.
No, fuck him. I don't want his money. He's the only
one. Fuck him. No money from Elon. Elon. Hey, Elon. Fuck you. We don't.
Yeah, fuck you, buddy.
But if anybody else within reason, we'll take your money. Jenn, it was great to have you on the show. Thank you for bringing a movie that Donato clearly should have watched by now and that I had a really good time with as well. I hope that we'll have you back on sometime soon and you can get something else weird for us.
Thank you guys so much. This was so fun.
Donato, you want to take us out?
Dance.